Let's take a look at complex sentences. Complex sentences are when you have one independent clause plus one or more dependent clauses put together in the same sentence. I want you to think about these as single parent families. There's one parent, and this parent may have one child, this parent may have two children, this parent may have three or four children. Okay? Everything working in this sentence is a parent child kind of relationship. And you see two examples here of what a complex sentence might look like. You notice that sometimes the child can come first, as it does here in this first example. And you notice sometimes the child can come at the end of a sentence. And there are some other places that we'll look at here in just a minute. But if you notice, these two sentences are saying the exact same thing. I've just flipped the order of how I say those things. One of these sentences needs a comma, the other sentence does not. And so when deciding how to punctuate this sentence, determine where your independent clause is. And I have underlined the dependent or the independent clause in these sentences. I will go home and eat dinner. This is my adult. After class is my dependent clause. And so in determining which one of these two sentences needs punctuation, I'm going to follow this basic rule. If your sentence is written independent clause, dependent clause, you don't necessarily need a comma. But if your sentence is written dependent clause, independent clause, you do need a comma. So file that away just kind of in the back of your memory. If your sentence is ID, no comma. If your sentence is D or starts with a D, it's going to be D comma I. And so you see these sentences correctly punctuated now here at the bottom of your screen. After class, comma, I will go home and eat dinner. I have a dependent clause, which I need to follow with a comma, and then I have my independent clause. And then you see if you want to write it the other way, now the comma has disappeared because I'm writing in the ID pattern that we just talked about. So let's talk about what to do now when there's more than one child in your sentence. The first thing we have to do is make sure that your children are separated. And there are three different ways that you can separate the children. You see here in the first example, I'm going to start the sentence with a dependent clause after this rough work week. I'm going to separate that child from my independent clause. I will go see a movie on Friday. So right now I'm writing in this D comma I pattern. But here I have a second child present if Tom asks me. I don't need a comma between Friday and if because now I'm writing in the ID pattern. So you see out there in the semicolons out to the side, our pattern is now D comma I, which is the basic rule that we talked about a minute ago. But we also have an ID involved in this sentence as well. And so that's the first way that you could do this. The second way is to start off the sentence with both of your dependent clauses. After this rough work week, comma, if Tom asks me, comma, I will go see a movie on Friday. Make sure you keep the children separated so they're easy to identify. We have two children in this sentence. We have a dependent clause, comma, dependent clause, comma, independent clause. The third way you can do this is the exact opposite of what we just talked about. Now we're going to stick our children down here at the end. We're going to start off with our independent clause. I will go see a movie on Friday. After this rough work week is my first child. If Tom asks me, is my second child. And so I want to make sure that I have a comma there so that the reader knows that I have two children involved in this sentence. Basically, what I want you to learn as you're getting ready to start evolving your simple sentences into complex sentences is that dependent clauses add spice to your writing. Make sure you use them. They give information that maybe you left out in your rough draft and you went back and edited it. This is a common time we see those things come into play. As any good parent will tell you, things are much better when you know where your children are. And you're going to have to know where your children are so that you know whether you need to use a comma or whether you're going to be okay without one. The third thing I want you to take away is that some children can easily pose as adults. Adults have a different time posing as children. And so, what I mean by that is sometimes students think that because something is bigger than something, that it's the adult. But if you look at that sentence up there, after this rough work week, I will go see a movie on Friday. The child is roughly the same size as the adult. So, how do you know which one's the child and which one's the adult? Which one doesn't need the other one? If I said I will go see a movie on Friday, I have a sentence. Everything else in that sentence is a dependent clause. It's very hard for me to convince you that I will go see a movie on Friday is not a sentence. So if you're having trouble finding the dependent clause, find the independent clause. Whatever is left is the child. It's much easier to spot an adult than it is a child. The fourth thing that I want you to do is Google subordinating conjunctions. You're going to get a list of a bunch of words in the English language. You don't need to know all of them. Just notice as you're reading that list, which ones do you like to use as the starting word in your sentence? And what that's going to do is that's going to tell you that in this sentence, I'm going to need a comma because I started it with a subordinating conjunction. And I automatically know I'm writing a D, comma, I pattern. So take a look at that list of subordinating conjunctions you get when you Google it. Find the ones that you write sentences with and just make a mental note. I need to go back and make sure I put commas in the correct place in that sentence. If you're still a little confused about how to use commas in these types of sentences, you may want to check out my video on commas and periods. We talk about this using a couple of different examples than we've used in this video. You're also welcome to send me an email at the email address you see there on the screen, or stop by my office during the office hours listed in your syllabus. If I'm not available, check out our wonderful tutors in L200. They're free and they are very good in helping you find these kind of issues with your paper. And then if you're one of our distance learners and you like to learn on the internet, check out that website that Purdue has.